Welcome, and thank you for joining us for this webinar presentation. We are the Defense Systems Information Analysis Center, or DSIAC, one of 3 IAC domains in the DoD Information Analysis Centers operating under the Defense Technical Information Center, DTIC, within the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. Our informative webinar series highlights current and emerging research and technology developments. It presents an opportunity for accelerating the DoD's leverage of these advancements by increasing awareness and fostering technical collaboration. DSIAC serves as one of the premier information research partners and curators of technology advancements and trends for the defense systems community. As such, our organization supports those working in the defense systems domain of DoD research and engineering. We do so by helping navigate the vast landscape of scientific and technical information, allowing our customers to get a head start on their technical projects. With an understanding of the defense system's DoD research and engineering landscape, we provide research and analysis services. We help unlock access to information, knowledge, and best practices from government, industry, and academia to stimulate innovation, foster collaboration, and eliminate redundancy. We hope you enjoy this webinar presentation and that it serves as a catalyst for community collaboration and improved DoD defense systems research.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Taylor Knight, and I am the technical lead with DSIAC. I will be your host today. We are very excited to have Dr. Liu with us today to talk about digital twin research and development for metal additive manufacturing processes. But before we get started, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping notes. As you saw in our intro video, DSIAC offers a variety of services to the DoD community and their contractors. And one of those is a free research service, our technical inquiries, or we call them TIs. So as long as you're having any sort of DoD government funding, you can submit any S&T question to our analysts, and we'll research it for 4 free hours to help give you a jump start on any topic that relates to our technical focus areas. You can submit this at our website, which I'll throw in the chat, and it'll prompt you to log into our member portal, so you can submit the request there, or you can also email me and we can chat about this offline. Today's slides for our webinar can be downloaded from the webinar's website, which I will also throw in the chat, so you can follow along while Dr. Liu presents, or you can look at them after the fact. And if you haven't had a chance to grab them, again, as I said, I'll throw the link in the chat momentarily. Also, if you experience any technical difficulties during our presentation, it's being recorded and we will upload it to our YouTube channel in a few days' time. So that will also be on the webinar's website, which will be in the chat momentarily. Finally, if at any time during this wonderful webinar you have a question, I ask that you use the Q&A section instead of the general chat. It's just easier for tracking purposes. So you can find the Q&A in the very bottom right corner of your WebEx browser or window. There's an ellipses there that will pop up a Q&A, like a menu, and there's a Q&A option, and you can enter your questions there. So we'll have the Q&A session at the end. However much time is left, we'll try to answer as many as possible. And then from that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Frank Liu. So let me grab his bio and we'll get started. Dr. Frank Liu is the Michael and Joyce Bittner Professor of Mechanical Engineering at Missouri University of Science and Technology. He received his BS from National Chiang Kung University in Taiwan, his master's from North Carolina State University, and his PhD from the University of Minnesota. He currently serves as the director of the Intelligent Systems Center at Missouri S&T. He's published a book on rapid prototyping, along with over 400 technical papers. Dr. Liu's research focuses on hybrid, additive, and subtractive process integration, process modeling, automated repair, and advanced material fabrication. Recently, he received the SME Frederick W. Taylor Research Medal. He is a fellow of ASME and SME. So with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Dr. Liu, and we will get started.
Okay, thank you, Taylor. Yeah, and thank you all for your participation today. So I'm going to share with you our digital twin research R&D in the metal additive manufacturing process. So let's see. So the outline of my presentation is, first I would like to give a little bit background on the metal additive manufacturing, or called the AM. Digital twins, I'm going to use a case study on residual stress. And then I'll talk about digital twin graph and the connectivity, and then machine learning in AM digital twins, and some of the challenges in the future work. And by the way, in our lab, we are actually building our own system. So this, what you're seeing here, this is a robotic wire feed additive manufacturing system. So our lab is also called LAMP lab, laser additive manufacturing process. And the machine here is also designed and fabricated ourselves, sponsored by National Science Foundation. And we call that advanced materials and manufacturing, additive manufacturing process. So this is a powder-based system. We have been working on the metal and research since 1997. And we specialize in custom AM system and component design and integrations, especially in the hybrid system integration and the process planning. So we are, for example, working with partners like Pine and then Siemens to develop their NX additive manufacturing process, hybrid manufacturing. And also work with the BMG Mori to commercialize actually their first DED system. Yeah. And of course on the repair and then monitoring and controls, part calculations, and digital twin for additive manufacturing processes, and then digital factories. So the focus I'm going to talk about is more on the DED, directed energy deposition powder feed system. Yeah, and the DED is the general characteristics is these are laser based, so it's a low heat input. Yeah, so it has less base material distortion in terms of residual stress compared to welding. And also, there's a very good metallurgical bonds between the deposit and substrate materials. And then it's compatible with many advanced materials. And so it's especially good in terms of repair and remanufacturing. So this was actually one of our first systems that we developed a process plane. So starting from a CAD model, it will automatically generate the tool paths, and for deposition and for machining. So that's the hybrid process. In terms of, so metal AM has emerged as a disruptive digital manufacturing technology. However, it still have a lot of issues. Yeah. So for example, in terms of geometry, for example, if we are going to, for traditional manufacturing methods, you probably don't worry too much about the material composition at different locations. Yeah, there are still some issues, but for metal additive, this is especially an issue. For example, the first layer, if we are trying to make the consistent microstructure, for example, so the first layer, for example, the condition is very different, and it could be different than the second layer here, and could be different than third layer, and so on. So because of that, it's kind of geometry dependent, and also the material dependent, and then we'll try to avoid the defect and like a residual stress and yeah. So there are a lot of issues. The one good thing about the metal additive is the DED process. You can make multi materials. So for example, functionally graded materials. So anyway, if it's a function of geometry, then it's not the good news, because then it's very complicated. Yeah. So we try to see if we can resolve these issues. So probably the process modeling is probably the first step. Yeah, trying to model what's going on. And as you can see, this is just one example to show the comparison between experiment and simulations. And so we try to use experiments and the sensors to see to capture whether or not the temperature history is some of the simulation is consistent with the experiment. And because we do this quite a lot, so when I first see the digital twins, because you need model, you need sensors. So I think that, hey, we actually can do a digital twin for this. So this is actually some kind of snapshot about our system here. So what is a digital twin? So a digital twin is a virtual representation of process that spans its life cycle. Yeah, so it's not only one case, not only model and validate. Yeah, it's update from the real-time data and the history also, and use the process modeling, machine learning, and the reasoning to help decision making. So, for example, this is our AM system, and this is the model. Yeah, and then we probably have some kind of sensor to get the data, so we can improve the model and improve the process also. And some of the process, for example, the microstructure, this is after fabrication, so this is offline. So even the offline data, for example, you have some cracks or you have successful parameters that can also be included into the digital twin. And we try to use machine learning also to get the data. And I'll mention that because the reason why we use machine learning. And then, so this process is supposed to be continuously used to improve the system. So why are we using digital twins? As well, I just mentioned that we can use sensor data from the physical test and the data from the virtual model. And of course, those sensor can be, experiment data can be used to validate your model. But we try to make use of those different kind of tests and continuously improve the system. So we can give some insights in many critical aspects of the manufacturing process, and more importantly, hopefully be able to get that information quickly, so we can make. So it's a very critical tool for the most decision-making process. And if we can do that, then we can improve the operational efficiency, automation of multitask, and the training, validations, and the eventual goal is to achieve the so-called first-time build success. Yeah, that's why I mentioned before that it could be a function of the geometry. So in other words, building different geometry depends on your requirements. You may have to fine-tune some of the parameters, but whenever you have a new system coming, hopefully we don't have to, or at least minimize the try and error process and achieve the first-time success. So this is I just like to remind you that there is fundamental research gaps and future directions for digital twins, and this was recommended by national academies in 2024. So the first recommendation is for the federal agencies. First recommendation is launch new cross-cutting programs to advance mathematical, statistical, and the computational foundations for digital twins. And then second recommendation is ensure the verification, validation, and uncertainty qualifications are integral part of the new digital twin programs. And yeah, this is actually a book, so I don't, but those two are sometimes I feel very important. So so in our lab, so this is the process controls, kind of give you some idea. So this is the 3D printer, the metal additive process. And there is some kind of sensor, and sensor get the sensor data back to the control system. And normally we call that feedback control of fuzzy logic control. And going into the logic controller to control the printer. However, they are in the digital trains, they are also feed-forward control can be provide input here. Yeah, and those are could be from the analytical model, could be FEM model, or could be the integration of those. We call that surrogates model. Yeah. So for, in other words, then so those information will feed into the printer, and then we will supposed to record all the data and then train the digital train. So if we look at the overall parameters in the DED process, you can see, for example, here we have for DED process, we have laser beam, we call this a powder beam, they interact, and then to come up with the parts. And if you look at carefully, there are a lot of, I just list some of those. Yeah, there are 50 different process parameters. Some of them may be important, some of them may be minor important, okay, in this process. And they could all influence the final product quality. Yeah, so it's actually a very complicated system. So then we try to do some modeling to understand the process. And however, computational efficiency is still a significant challenge, yeah, because there are so many parameters there. And so in general, the computation is kind of slowed. So to address these issues, we need to reduce the computational time by using other different methods, like machine learning we just talked about. So in terms of the model, yeah, and there you can see why it's so complicated. So this is for the metal AM modeling process. Yeah. So before the certifications, there are powder dynamics. Okay, we want to know what kind of powder and what kind of chill gas, and then how the powder is going to behave, whether or not they can focus into the melt pool, yeah, and laser beam interactions with the powder, and melt pool thermal fluid, and then during the consolidations, the microstructure and phase transformations, and then after it's solidified, then what are the residual stress and the distortion there? So each one of them could be some effort to model it, yeah. So I'm going to focus on the residual stress, yeah, because during the deposition process, there is a tensile stress condition that can affect material performance, and also there is a compressive residual stress once it's cooled down. The bad news is they are not normally, they don't cancel each other out. Okay, so this is the sample I shown here. This is just a flat plate, but we just deposit a little bit here, and you can kind of see it's distorted. If this is the case, then whenever we are trying to repair something or even deposit the new parts, it's going to distort. Yeah. So it causes so depends on the application. So in some cases, they are probably this is probably a big problem, yeah, in order to have the residual stress. That's why I use this as an example, yeah, to talk about that. So we try to overcome these issues, but before we overcome it, we need to understand how that works. So this is, let me give you one example. So this is actually a part that we use for testing, validate our model. Yeah, so this is a very simple simple case, this is just a thin wall here. And we put two thermocouple just to validate. So we try to model the entire deposition process, including those 2 points, and then see if how good the model compare with experiments. In this process, we feel that the temperature is probably the most important. So we try to measure, or at least something that we can measure. And then we deposit, this is so totally only 6 layers. Yeah. And then we'll see what happens. So this is actually, so we use a conventional finite element model. And as you can see, and we have, I think we probably have enough measures. So you can see they are actually, it's compare the experiments with conventional method. I think it's with the model with experiment is fit very well. The major problem is it takes about 17 hours. Yeah, in the student's computer. Yeah. So because of that, we try to reduce to see if is there a way that we can reduce the computational time. So on the most left-hand side is the one I just shown you, the 17 hours. Yeah. And then there is, and we found out there's another method called chunk method. Yeah, chunk method is an approach that, for example, we put, for example, put 2 elements together and we call it a chunk. Yeah, so they are, so in this case, we have this one chunk. So this we call this chunk method. So and then over here we have a so-called layer method. So we treat one layer as one element. So this is kind of approximation. Yes, we know, but we try to accelerate to see how well we can actually accelerate whether or not we can reduce the computational time. And then we also have some kind of experiments and thermocouple to measure it. Yeah. And so this is actually, yeah, so those are the thermocouple. We also have a camera, optical camera to look at that. Yeah. So again, this is actually the one I shown you. This is the 17 hours for the traditional one. Yeah. And so this is chunk method, the result from the chunk methods. And so this is a half track, this is quarter track. So quarter track means divide this into 4. So each element is a quarter. And this one divide this into 2. So each chunk is half of them. Yeah. And then so for the chunk method, you can see it's fine, but not, in some cases, not as good. Yeah, but for some people, maybe they view this as acceptable. Yeah. Anyway, although this is approximation, but so as a result, there are some mismatch in some places. And then this is actually the layer method. Yeah. So layer methods, yeah, that means we treat the whole layer as one element. And you can see this is actually even more, you probably can only get some kind of general trends, yeah, about the layer method. So this is the summary of the results. So in terms of computational time, this is in terms of minutes. So for the just traditional FEA methods, it's about 1,000, yeah, 1,000 minutes. That's about 17 hours, as what I mentioned before. And then, so this is probably half, or this is probably the chunk method over here, and this is the layer method. So layer method is 29 minutes, yeah. But as you can expect from the thermocouple, yeah, so the layer method has the most errors and so on, yeah, as expected, yeah. Now the question is let's say 34 minutes or yeah, this is supposed to be fastest we can calculate for this case. So is it 30 minutes acceptable? Yeah, it depends on what you want to do. Yeah, but in general, we think this is probably not good because that's probably not sufficient because this is a very simple case. What happens if it's a more complicated case? Yeah, probably would still take a few hours to compute. So we start thinking about using machine learning, yeah, in here, yeah. So because those AM processes are very complicated, so the model we feel too slow. So we try to develop a surrogate model, okay, to help. And so it's what is surrogate model? It's a black box model that approximates the system's behavior by fitting the input-output data to simple functions. And you could also use neural networks, yeah, to get some more details there. So it's basically something like this. So this is digital. The whole thing is a digital twin system, but here this is the neural network. And then so we feedback the data from the experiments, data from the simulations are all fit as a training model into the system, and could be also as a feedback we can continue to improve the system. So so this is when we developed the surrogate model. So from the experimental data and from the modeling. So those data we gathered and used that to train some of the surrogate model. Those are kind of, we use neural networks, different kinds of, actually 4 different types of neural networks. Yeah, XGBoost, for example. Yeah, and so those are 4 different different types of neural network that we can see. And then we try to predict what's going on. Yeah, we'll try to predict the temperature. Yeah. So here is the results. Here you can see those are the 4 different neural network methods we call the surrogate models. And then their computational time and memory usage. And here, this is the y-axis is the actual temperature, and x-axis is the predicted temperature. So if the predicted temperature is can match with the actual temperature, then it should be along this line. So the closer the data to this line, that is the data is much better. Yeah, and as you can see, except probably the first one is not as good. Yeah, the rest of the 3 are actually pretty good. And if you look at the computational time, the first method is probably, it's faster, but it's probably not as good. Yeah. So, but like LSTM, this would be good. GRU is actually good. So this is in terms of seconds. So in other words, we can basically make a decisions in 76 seconds or approximately one minute or so. So we can reduce the one we just talked about, maybe from half an hour to 1 minute. Yeah. So that will be much more acceptable. Yeah. So this is some kind of effort, try to use machine surrogate model to predict the system. So what's next? Because this is a very simple example. Yeah. So the stress could be toolpath dependence. Okay, it could be also parameters dependence. A lot of parameters there. Yeah. So and then so we try to see can we how do we go from here? Yeah. So if we look at the application in metal AMs, a lot of people are interested in the microstructures and the mechanical properties and strengths, for example, tensile, fatigue, hardness, darkness, ductility, for example, repair, remanufacturing, they have their own requirements as well. And some of the digital material like functionally grade materials, multi-materials. So there are a lot of possible applications there. So in order to, so maybe I could use so our approach is trying to see then maybe dig into details. For example, people are interested in microstructure and mechanical properties. If that's the case, so we probably need to look at some of the defect source, and probably we need to, as I mentioned, dig into the details. For example, some of the parameters may be related to the equipment. Yeah. For example, the issues with the laser source and also printing chamber conditions, faulty all the coating delivery systems, or improper base plate dimensions. For example, maybe the base plate is too small, something like that. Yeah. And then some of the problem may be because of the printing conditions. For example, non-optimal conditions, maybe, for example, the laser or the travel speed. Yeah. Material composition not up to the requirements. So although you may you purchase the powder, but they're from a vendor and they give you some kind of specs, but the question is, are those composition the same, exactly the same as what you required? Most likely not. Yeah. Basically, we have the similar problem, and then the problem is we found out that they give you some kind of, there are some tolerances yeah, for the compositions. And sometimes, depending on the material, some of the tolerances is also very important, may affect your final result. And material ejections that may also cause the issues. And some of the problem may be related to the printing techniques. Okay. For example, improper printing strategies. For example, print this kind of T-shaped parts. Maybe this might be much easier, but this one, so because this one you may not need support material, but this one you have to have support material. So some of those may affect the complexity of the build, and also even the result of the build. And other things like material quality, okay, the process applied to produce a feedstock, okay, recycled feedstock utilizations, and maybe some external gas trap, okay, in there. So you will do it, in other words, some kind of gas and porosity. So when you deposit that, if you're not careful, you're going to have porosity in your sample. Undesirable elements, characteristic of the feedstock. Okay, so but this is just one example, okay, to show you that if you care about defect, okay, and then for example, other things, another defect is like residual stress is not quite here, okay. So how do we actually form digital twins to address those issues? Yeah. So the research we are doing is called digital twin graph and the connectivities. Yeah. So basically, we have some kind of list all the features here. Okay, representation of entire systems. Okay, that we could include the model, the sensors, parameters. Okay, performance, and so on. And then we connect them together. For example, this yellow dot could represent, for example, this is the temperature, okay, temperature during the processing. And it may be, so this temperature may be related to, for example, this could be the laser, okay, and the other one may be the focal area, for example. Yeah, so this would be, and there are probably others. Yeah, this is just one example. Maybe the material property also, okay. And then this temperature and as a result, the cooling rate is going to affect, for example, your microstructure. For example, it's going to, if the cooling rate is high, maybe your grain size is going to be small. And then, so your grain size is going to impact your strength, for example. Yeah, and so on. So we need to have all of the this digital twin graph and the connectivities to link all the parameters we are of our interest together. And then we try to do from the experiments and from the simulation, we'll be able to basically find out what's the weight, okay, for different connectivities. Yeah. So initially we probably connect all of them together, everything. But some of the things, for example, if those two are not this yellow dot and blue dots are not connected, then maybe then there should be no connection. So how do we know they are connected or not? So this is actually a very simple case we tested. For example, laser power, laser scan speed, mail-port depths and lengths. Okay. And this is a repeating of this. Okay, that's why the diagonal is 1 because they are compared into each other. Okay, and then if so from the training you will be able to see, okay, some of the connectivity are strong. For example, laser power in this particular case, laser power is directly connected to mail-forward length, pretty strong link. And there are some of those are not as strong. Yeah. So anyway, from here, then you will be able to decide which link may be more important than the other. Yeah. And we think that this way you can make use of all the data of the model and from the sensor. So this is kind of schematics about the system. So this is the physical train and this is digital train here. Physical train means the experimental data. You probably have sensors there, and so the sensor. So there will be sensor data coming, and after processing the data, then you use that to train your digital train. And so when we talk about the sensors here, so we can also look into the something related to the sensor signatures. Yeah. For example, in the mail pool, some of the mail pool parameters, the shape, temperature fields are important. Maybe there are some of those, maybe more than that. Layer printing, shape, temperature fields, okay, distortions, and so on, and powder streams. Okay. So all the we try to identify some of the parameters we may be interested in getting, and then we will try to see are there any sensors that can actually capture those. Maybe some of them it's difficult, okay, but it's okay. We do our best. So for example, then we can. Some people use IR camera over here. Okay, so this is the process. So IR camera to look at the temperature and of every point, for example. And some researchers try to use the X-ray monitoring. So during the processing, then you will be able to see how laser interact with those powders. Yeah. And then, for example, if you have acoustic sensors, you'll be able to just from the voice, the sounds, you probably can identify, okay, boring happened or lack of fusion happened, something like that. So in other words, we try to connect those sensors with the signatures we just identified. And this is a little bit more, so once we have that, this is a little bit more expansion of what we just talked about. Okay, so the sensors will be from physical trains, okay, or the metal additive systems. And so the sensors is going to have this sensor data. And so we need to start thinking about what kind of data storage we should have. And we should probably normalize some of the data and maybe some reduction of maybe for some data which are not that important, maybe we should try to reduce some of the data. And there's another issue that some, for example, the IR camera may have too much information, and how do you reduce the storage space, something like that. And then we start to go to the training set. Okay, so there could be different types of, so there may be a majority instance, there may be minority. And minorities, so sometimes the data, we know some of the data may be, because we put the sensors and the sensor, they output different kind of data there. But we also need to think about, so what kind of data would be more important? And so the graph chart is very important to show. And so for some of the minority instances, maybe so something that's not as important, maybe we should reduce the data points. So in other words, here we need to make a decision what kind of data and how much data we need. Yeah. And then from there, then we use that to train use that as an input to train our system. Yeah. And so that's basically the idea. So this is one of the examples about to generate some kind of map. For example, this is a laser scanning speed, and this is laser power. So that you can see the dotted line here, the dots, those are from experiments. First we do the modeling and validate by the experiments. And then from the model, we can come out with those predictions about their conditions. So for example, at this kind of laser scanning speed and certain laser power, did we get what kind of condition we have? So for example, this could be boring condition happens, predictions, or for example, over here, this is lack of fusions. The green area is a good area, yeah, for example, yeah. From there, then from the machine learning, you can plot this diagram so that will be good for the user, yeah. So if I'm going to avoid those boring keyholes or lack of fusion, then I can just use the green area, yeah, for the process. Another thing we have not actually done this, but it's called transfer learning. So transfer learning is basically a different kind of transfer learning. For example, we have trained this for machine A, and if we are going for the company that maybe there is a machine B, how do we actually, can we use whatever we use? We trained because it takes a lot of time from machine A to machine B. We call that instance-based TL, transfer learning. Yeah, there is another one called feature-based transfer learning. Okay, and this one is basically we try to train for one material and try to predict another material. So because the material is not that simple, different material has a lot of, I think probably a lot of the parameters, material properties, and most of them are actually functional temperature. So it's very complicated. So this is a feature-based transfer learning. And some people may, like, for example, try to see, okay, can we use powder bed model to predict DED? Can we use powder bed digital train to train DED behavior? And that's called model-based DL, yeah, because this is a lot of differences there. So probably a model will be needed, yeah. And so that's why it's called model transfer learning method. And there is a multitask learning, which is actually for basically we have multiple of those. Yeah, so it's a combination of that. So there are some challenges for the future work. Yeah. So for example, we talk about there are multi-physical feedback and the multi-model parameters there. And for the sensors, we can only find maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, okay, different kinds of sensors. And so not everything we can model. So sometimes we try to see if there's a correlation between multi-physical feedback to multi-model parameters, try to see if there's a relationship. Sometimes the solution may not exist, okay, may not be unique, okay. And maybe there's a multiple to one relationship, okay, that can only measure one in situ, for example. Yeah, so that's one of the challenges. The other challenge is so-called data assimilation. Okay, so the dynamic, basically because of the uncertainties. Okay, so can we, for example, the data, hopefully, we hope that one day we can use data from different machines, different materials, or different geometries and different applications. We can learn from all of those. Yeah, so that's also a challenge. The one I talk about, the machine learning, that strategy is certainly a good direction to go. Yeah, but this is also a challenge. How do we make use of, because they are quite different, and if we are not careful, we may end up degrade the digital twin performance. Yeah, so we need to be very careful. The other one is also about uncertainties. Okay, especially for the real events, because sometimes we try to see, okay, what might fail. Okay, and most of our data, our experiment or model are trying to model so that we can be successful. Okay, but those failure case could be real events. Yeah, so those are actually also a challenge there. So in conclusions, yeah, I would like to say that as a summary, yeah, I think additive manufacturing is a disruptive digital factory, digital manufacturing technology. And the concept for, just summarize, concept for developing digital twin for metal AMs are summarized. And digital twin can often learn from the past and resolve process issues quickly, okay? And can be a key to AM certification for new parts, okay? And that's very important. Yeah, if it's, as I mentioned, it could be geometry dependent, okay? But if we can have a good digital twin, we might be able to certify a new part, okay? But there are still a lot of challenges to overcome, yeah. So that's my presentation, and thank you for your attention. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Liu. We have a handful of questions, so I'll try to get in as many as we can before the hour is up. So I'm just going to dive in. I'll read them one at a time and get your take on them and your answer. Okay, so question number one. Were there any AM post indications that warranted the use of a non-destructive inspection? And if so, what methods of inspection were used?
Yeah, it depends on probably inspection. You are probably talking about the defect. So depends on what kind of defect you're talking about. For example, non-destructive there's a micro CT, some kind of X-ray. So after you make the parts, you will be able to see is there porosity or cracks. Yeah, those are non-destructive methods. However, there are some limitations how big a parts you can have. Yeah, because a lot of the X-ray cannot penetrate through the very large parts. Yeah, and I believe there are some other methods also. Probably I feel that the best non-destructive method is probably in process. For example, if you can develop acoustic methods that you can see, okay, something is not right. Maybe boring or some kind of porosity, that may be the best. Yeah.
Great, thank you. This is from a little bit earlier on in the slides. When CI/CD is used, will every part be slightly different until the process is stable with no additional changes necessary?
When you say CI, you're talking about which?
Let me see, let me find that was the name in the chat. I'll go back to it. This was from Mr. Paul's letter. If you want to throw in the chat, Paul, what you're referring to when you said CI/CD? We can come back to that question. Oh, continuous integration / continuous development.
Can you phrase the question again?
Yes. So when you're using continuous integration or continuous deployment, when that's used, will every part be slightly different until the process is stable with no additional changes necessary?
It's I think probably yeah, that's a good question, and depends on. I think when the computational power is when the time is limited, we probably focus on some focus part. That may be the quickest way. Yeah, and if we are trying, for example, when we are trying to do the more machine, if we try to do something more, for example, transfer learning for different materials or for different process, then I think it would be, the goal here is to predict different parts from different processes, but that might take a while to do. So if you, for example, if you are trying to, if you, for example, if you have a process that mainly have a part family that's very similar parts, then I would say that even if you talk about one part that's even faster, yeah, but it's possible that you can probably train a part family very quickly.
Thanks. All right, next question. How representative of the final part does the experimental data need to be for the DT to be accurate?
Yes, that's a good question also. Yeah, and yeah, we hope that that's why we talk about in some of the process the data will have to be screened. Yeah, so that bad data will not get into the process. So I think this is a very important task. Whenever you have the sensor data come in, for example, you might happen to have a batch of material which is not good, yeah, for example, and you will not know, yeah. And so I do not have a solution for something like that, but we probably try to make also try to make sure that the data looks reasonable. Yeah, if not, we need to find out why it's not consistent. Yeah.
Great. This is a two-part question. This gentleman is asking, where does all the digital twin information go and how is it organized? And are there any kinds of data architectures you're aware of in the DoD that do or could manage this?
Yeah, digital twin is still very, very young. Yeah, and part of the reason is because it takes time. As you can see, we are still, at this moment, we are still trying to see what parameters are actually critical. Yeah, and I think that's the first step. Yeah, once you identify those, then there should be some kind of, how do you actually store those data? And I think this process is actually very important. Yeah, be able to decide what data to keep and what data not to keep, and something like that. Yeah, those are actually very important. Yeah.
Okay, next question. Let's see. Given that the surrogate model is black box, how do you know which parameters or variables of the physics model to tune when calibrating the DT?
Okay, so which parameter is variable? Here you are talking about the, okay. Yeah, here what normally we have, in this particular case, we have a goal, yeah, which is we try to measure the temperature, yeah, and so in this case, this is pretty because we already have a goal. But I think for every parameters, that's why we need to identify some of the some of the goals, and then as you can see, so those are basically the application. I call that application, but those are the goals. Once you identify, for example, the microstructure we talk about, and then so we need to dig into it to see what might be the possible possible parameters we are looking at. And even if you are not sure, then the next step is we probably need to form this and then run some experiments. So you will be able to, so as I mentioned, that we connect everything together, and then we try to find out those from model and from experiments. And then we can identify, okay, some parameters are closely related and some of those are not, for example. Yeah. And if they are not, we can ignore, for example, this one is not that important, so we can just ignore that parameters. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question is, what simulation tool or language are you using for your DT model?
Yeah, that's also a good question. Yeah, we have a couple of projects going on, and one project we just use standard finite element analysis. Yeah, and another one is we work with another university. They develop their own modeling tool, and the advantage of that is it's much faster. Yeah, so depends on, and so in this case, we are trying to use we try to use the standard software to do the model. Yeah. So and then we try to use, part of the reason we use this is that we try to use the model to get relatively accurate data, and then use that to train our serverless model. Yeah, but depends on different scenario and depends on what is your. So in this case, the temperature is important, but in some cases you may not really need to use FEA. Yeah, maybe some kind of analytical model may be sufficient. Yeah, that will be much faster.
Thank you. Okay, next one is, do you recommend a post-processing heat treatment for enhancement of mechanical properties or alteration of grain structure for a wire feed laser AM application?
Yeah, we, of course, depends on your applications, but from industry, I think that's kind of standard. I think a lot of industries, they like to suggest to have heat treatments, yeah, so they can get a consistent microstructure. However, it depends. From my experience, I feel that in some cases, you don't really need heat treat, but the heat treatment can, I think, a standard practice, they can get more consistent results. I think that's what they are looking for.
Great. Okay, I think we'll make this our last question. And let's see. Okay, so last question will be, does this approach work with AM thermoplastics as well, since they tend to have anisotropic properties?
Yes, yeah, I use digital twin for the metal AM because I'm familiar with it. Yeah, but as you can see, now digital twin can be used for almost any field. Yeah. At the beginning, people try to we try to use model to and then validate with experiments. But later on, they found out that the model are too ideal. Yeah, and in this particular case, there are a lot of other parameters there. So that's why we use digital twin and try to do continuous improvement. Some people even said that, for example, human beings, when you are going to your doctor, the doctor will ask you your previous history, and that's by itself is also a scenario, some kind of digital twin scenario. They try to understand your previous history so they can treat you better. Yeah, so it can be applied to almost any areas.
Thank you for the insight. We're going to honor the hour mark, so I am going to end the webinar here, but I want to thank everyone for taking their time to join us today. I learned a lot, as I hope everyone else did. And thank you, Dr. Liu, for your time and your knowledge. This was very informative. Quick question for those that there are a few questions that weren't able to be answered. Would it be okay if I shared your email address in the chat and people could reach out to you offline if they still had questions?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll throw his email in the chat for everyone. Any questions, you can feel free to email him, and I'm sure he would love to answer them. But thank you so much again, Dr. Liu, and everyone. Please enjoy your day, and we'll see you next time, hopefully.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.